Hello and welcome back to the Joe and Toby Talk podcast. I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Mr. Toby Jones, and we will be talking about the wonderful world of cricket and the Ashes, and of course this wonderful summer of cricket, I suppose, that we've got to look forward to. Last time out, we did actually preview the Ashes series and gave our predictions, and well, they might as well make us selectors, Toby, because we got it absolutely nailed on, that starting 11 that they went for. And yeah, did you enjoy the first test match before we get on to any results and all of that? Did you enjoy actually the hype and the actual watching of the first Ashes test match?
Well, you know, when as a snooker fan and you watch everything else, and then the World Snooker Championship comes along, and there's that very slight bit of difference that comes along with the World Snooker Championship, and exactly the same occurs for the Ashes. There's just something extra that you don't get in other Test series. Any sort of cricket, in my opinion, it's the best, really, the best Test series of them all. And it was great of what I could watch apart from work being in the way. I watched most of Saturday, Sunday. I was off work on Monday, so I watched most of that. And I watched the climax on Tuesday, which I know you did as well. So watched a fair amount of the test. And obviously the second test starts on a Wednesday, so that's going to be more loaded towards the second half that I'll be able to watch. But what I saw of the first test, it was really everything and more than we predicted it could be. And I think sets up a really good series, and without getting into things too much, I think England were better than I expected, but maybe made to look a little bit better by Australia not having a great test. But we can talk about that in a bit more detail in a bit.
Absolutely. I think, you know, it was everything that Test cricket needs, actually. You know, we had full packed crowds for all 5 days, and I think that's really important, really, to try and get popularity back into the long format of the game, because, you know, very much like you say, the World Championship of snooker, you know, lots of people have said that they want that to be shorter and different formats, and, you know, I'm sure that in the coming years there will probably be discussions about Test cricket, or the Ashes at least, and you know, how that series is played. I know there is a certain other Ashes series going on with the women, and that's multi-format. So I don't, you know, maybe down the line that's the sort of route they'll go down. I hope not, but you know, I think it was what Test cricket needed. I think had it been won in 3 days or something similar, it would have maybe gave more to the argument that Test cricket is done. So I was really happy that went right down to the wire. We had 5 full days of play. Obviously, you know, there was some rain delays in there, but I think even if, you know, if there was no rain, we probably would have went down to the wire. I think Australia probably would have played it a little differently in that final innings with a bit more time. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Pardon me. I think the only thing it missed was free-to-air television. I think that was the big difference for me. Obviously, Sky do a great job with the cricket, but it just felt like not everybody could be a part of it, and I think that was a shame. But yeah, obviously England, you know, ran Australia very, very close in the end. And the first big talking point really was that declaration on day one. Obviously England played very, very well on day one. They scored nearly 400 runs. And I think it was epitomised by Zach Crawley absolutely creaming the ball through covers on ball one. Ball one of the Ashes always seems to throw up something funny, doesn't it? You know, we had Steve Harmison's ball to Rose and you know, Mitchell Johnson as well having a big wide at some point on the first ball of the Ashes, and Zach Crawley whacks it for 4 and set up a really good innings. Obviously, Joe Root, the highlight, the standout of that innings, you would say. Another century for him to the tally. Harry Brook was playing quite well. Obviously got out in quite bizarre circumstances. But talk about that declaration, Toby. It was a very bold decision from Ben Stokes. But what's your opinions and views on it?
You talking about that, Just? Was Zach Crawley hit a 4 off Pat Cummins the first ball? Wasn't he out the first ball of the last Ashes? Or was it Rory Burns? Was it Crawley or Burns?
I think it was probably Burns. And I think they were 0 for 2, weren't they? I seem to remember after 4 balls. I remember that. I'm not sure if Crawley was playing back then. I don't know.
I'm going to have to have a look at this. I'm going to have to have a look at this because, I mean, to get from that to a 4 in that is a bit ridiculous. First ball, Mitchell Stark, Rory Burns. It was Rory Burns.
Yeah.
But, to get from that to a 4, that Australia series, forget about it. I made some quick notes before this based on my thoughts and looked at 3 factors that changed the game, +1. And the declaration is the +1 because I don't think the declaration had any difference, really.
I think the key thing with that declaration, we'd have probably only got another 20, 30 runs, if that.
I mean, we were 8 down, weren't we? I understand that we'd got Root at one end, but you'd got Ollie Robinson at one end, then Jimmy to come in. I think, maybe they could have got, if you were really picking stuff out, maybe just for the sake of it, they should have got to 400, but you know what? Does it really matter that much? No.
I think had England got 2 wickets on the final 10 minutes, I think the attitude towards it would be completely different.
That's right. People say it was reckless, but I think that there were other turning points in the game that were far more significant, really, than that.
I think it would have been reckless had we been 393 for 5. That would have been reckless, because there could have been an extra 150 runs on the table. Now, as it happens, those 20 runs could have made the difference in the end, but that wasn't the deciding factor for me. I think the main one for me, and I hate to say it, was the performance of James Anderson, I think. I don't know if he's on one of your 3 factors, but James Anderson, he bowled fine, but he wasn't at his absolute best, didn't get many wickets. I think he only got 1 in the whole match.
He did it a reverse sweep for 4, though.
Well, yeah.
On his first ball, I think.
Well, there you go. So, but, with the ball, and I think that shows how important James Anderson is. As good as Broad was, as good as Stokes did at times, and Ollie Robinson was okay. You need Anderson to really get you off to a good start, get one of the openers, and I feel like that's what we lacked, really. And obviously that then bled into later in the match when England could take the new ball and didn't. And I think had Anderson been at the top of his game, they wouldn't have even had that conversation. So, they probably wouldn't have got to the second new ball. So, yeah, that's that. I think that's one of the biggest factors for me.
Interesting. Okay.
What are your thoughts?
The worry for me, particularly in that first innings, is that Root carried us again. Or England, I should say. Because Crawley had a good innings. I was happy to see that. He started well. Duckett got out to a silly ball, just leaving his bat out from Josh Hazlewood, and the same happened in the second innings. Similar situations. That was a bit disappointing. But again, Root carried England. There were some good performances in there. I think that there was some definite promise from Harry Brook. He played well in both innings, actually.
Yeah.
And Johnny Bairstow had a good innings. The disappointment was Moeen Ali for me, but I think we'll talk about that in a bit more detail shortly. But going back to the declaration, it didn't make as much difference because Broad was on fire, wasn't he? That second morning, he got Warner, then Labuschagne, the following ball, that was excellent. Then obviously Steve Smith went cheap, so Australia was 67 for 3.
Yes.
And we really thought we'd got away in because, let's face it, Usman Khawaja, whilst a decent batsman, you wouldn't have thought he would have carried Australia. And that's my whole point about how Australia's batting was actually quite poor. And without Usman Khawaja to pull them through, I think it could have been a lot worse for Australia, to the extent, if there was 67 for 3, they could have seriously been looking at follow-on territory, I think.
Absolutely. I think in
Khawaja
both
didn't play
innings they
well.
were at a similar stage, 3 wickets down at around that 60, 70, 80 mark. And that's usually where England really sort of turn the screw. And usually it's Jimmy Anderson or, Ben Stokes in there bowling great deliveries. And I just think that's what we lacked. Broad did everything he could. He bowled superbly, and I think he was spent by the end of the Test match. He'd worked so hard. You said Root carried us. I think Broad carried us with the ball as well. Had it not been for Broad, and I know there was a lot of question marks over his selection, had he not been in the team, I don't know where we would have got our wickets. And funnily enough, that was the first time in the Bazball era that we've not taken 20 wickets in a Test match.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think it could happen again, quite possibly. But there's been a lot of criticism about Robinson, hasn't there?
I think it's the pace.
I don't know whether I agree with that so much. I mean, the problem is, it's the whole Steven Gerrard, Alex Ferguson analogy, that you're comparing him to somebody that's come before him, Jimmy Anderson. And you'd never... Anderson, best bowler we've seen, really. Certainly one of them anyway. So to compare Robinson to Anderson is harsh. If you look at Robinson's figures in the first innings, at least, went at 2.5 and over, 3 wickets. It can't grumble at that. And in the second innings, went at 2.25 and over and got 2 wickets. So I don't think Robinson had a bad time.
No.
I understand what people are saying to an extent, but I think it's all a bit overboard. But I absolutely agree on the Anderson thing, because that last couple of hours when they took the new ball, obviously, it was Broad and Robinson, and I was kind of going, where's Jimmy? This is exactly what we need at this time to get a wicket. I would guess, like you alluded to, I think, when we were both watching it, that probably Anderson wasn't fit to bowl at that point. That's the only explanation that can be thought of. I think England did hold on a little bit too long before the new ball, but again, I don't think it was a match decider. I don't think so. There were other things that went on. I mean, Stokes dropped Nathan Lyon. It's horrible to say dropped, because it was a bloody acrobatic catch anyway for what he tried to get, but that was a bit of a missed opportunity. But I think that 3 things, which I'm going to quickly talk on now, decided the game, and it was all... 2 of them were England's batting, and 1 of them was Moeen Ali. The Moeen Ali factor is, he did a decent job in the first innings, but obviously had that injury which came about and really struggled after that. And obviously the variation then had to come from Joe Root, who did a fine job, I have to say, and I think he's always been a good part-time spinner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lacking that killer spin, which Australia have with Nathan Lyon, that hurt England, I think, a little. So there's that element. But then there's 2 things that happened on day 4. And the second of which, in fairness, was all down to the Great British Sky, and that was the weather. Because we lost those 2 key openers very quickly in that sodden session of about half an hour at the end of Sunday. And I didn't say sodding, say sodden, like the ground. Okay. But obviously lost them both, 27 for no wicket, and then all of a sudden 27 for 2, and yet again Joe Root's out to deliver and get the runs. And you know what? Root didn't carry us in that innings because you had Root, Brook, Stokes all got 40 odd. So it wasn't bad at all, but it did very much feel like it could have been one of those capitulation innings after that. And we held the fort a little bit, but maybe not so much. So was that actually that wasn't day 4? Sorry, that was day 3, wasn't it? It was the Sunday evening that was. So that was day 3. Yeah, Friday. Yeah, that's right. Day 3. The worst thing that happened, in my opinion, was what happened at the start of day 4, and that was Monday. So I guess, well, as I say, I was off work, so I was watching it. I guess you might not have seen it, but the first ball of the day. So I think at this stage, England were probably maybe 50, 60, no, maybe 40 for 2, because I don't think Pope and Root had got too many after Crawley and Duckett went out, because obviously it was called short, the session.
Mm-hmm.
So England had a lead of about 30, 40 at that stage. And my thinking was, Root and Pope have got to stay there for an hour. Just got to stay there for an hour, get some runs on the board, and stay there for an hour or so. And then, first ball of the day, and Root plays his trademark reverse shot over the wicket. And misses the ball by an absolute mile.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh dear, here we go again. And sure enough, he played it the 2 shots after that and got it right and got 2 boundaries, so great. And England's attitude in that hour has been exactly how it's been throughout. Played aggressively. I think they'd kind of got 60-odd runs in no time, but within that point, Ollie Pope lost his wicket, albeit to a corker of a ball from Pat Cummins. And then, obviously, the big wicket was Root going out, and 129 for 4, and without being harsh, the last of the real recognised batsmen in Joe Root had gone. Because I say that in that everybody below Root is a bit gung-ho, maybe isn't the word, but aggressive is. Harry Brook, as I say, played really well, but he's still a novice when it comes to Test cricket, and he's in the middle order for a reason, to get runs. Ben Stokes, particularly in the first innings, was just terrible. It redeemed himself a bit in the second innings, and obviously Bairstow and Ali are quite aggressive as well. So very much had the feeling of that capitulation, and that was what lost England the match. I think not the declaration, but the overall approach. And I think that while it's overall a great approach for England, and I think it really makes things exciting and makes England a better team, I think there's a time and a place for it. You see in football with tactics that Jurgen Klopp played, for example, when Liverpool were doing well. Remember those days?
Mm-hmm.
But they would what would happen is they would go for it for 15 minutes. They'd really press for 15 minutes and go for it, and then they'd settle down for 15 minutes and then push teams again for 10, 15 minutes. And that was that bit of uncertainty turning the screw that made them successful. But doing it all the time just exposes you to all sorts. And obviously that, with England, is losing wickets cheaply, particularly of key batsmen. So I'd like to see, not necessarily toned down, but I think there's a time and a place for the aggressive batting that they play. There's nothing wrong with sticking there for half an hour to an hour, just letting the runs flow and getting a decent partnership going without having to smack the ball round. Because I think that did lose England the match. Now, equally, you could say, I guess, if they'd have stayed there for that hour, could it have been a draw? Maybe. Could England score raw runs have pressured Australia and Australia got out? Maybe. But I think it was that because, in fairness, as we saw on day 5, that wicket was absolutely dead.
Yeah.
Cummins and Lyon played well, but it was just absolutely dead, that wicket. Those two looked safe as houses there, and even Lyon hit a couple of boundaries, and I'm thinking, well, Nightford Lyon never hits a boundary. So it was, they were very safe. Captain's performance from Pat Cummins did really well, but I think they were aided by the pitch, and that's what I mean. I think that there's more to come from Australia. I feel like that wasn't their best performance.
No.
And I think that for England to compete with Australia, they've got to just temper this baseball attitude slightly, because this next test is crucial. If they go and lose this one and go 2-0 down, I think you can call it all over from winning the Ashes anyway. It's very unlikely you're A, going to get a result in all 5, and B, going to win 3 in a row. So that's my opinion on it, really. That I think that there's a time and a place for it, but overall, and I'm not a neutral at all, but watching kind of in the end, I thought, you know what, I'm not over bothered if Australia win this, which sounds really strange, but I thought that it would teach England a bit of a lesson potentially, and I hope it has done. But we'll see again on Wednesday. Sure enough, probably it won't have changed, but obviously that Ali issue has been resolved. They've brought in Reenan Ahmed potentially bowl. Whether he'll get in the side or not, I don't know. I personally doubt it, but he's only 18. But equally, at the same time, if you're good enough, is age really a factor? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, he did play a test match. I don't know when it was. I remember it. He got 7 wickets in the match. I think he got a 5 in there. I can't remember who it was against though. It might have been one of the ones in the subcontinent at some point. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's no way Ali should be playing. In my opinion, I don't think he should have played the first test match. I think I spoke about this in our previous podcast. I don't think Ali's ever been good enough really to be our mainline spinner, and certainly not now. So I like that they've called somebody else up. I wouldn't be surprised if they went for 4 seamers actually in the Lords match. I mean, Anderson's got a terrific record at Lords, so I think you've got to play Anderson. And Broad was brilliant in the first test match, so you got to play him. And as you say, Ollie Robinson got wickets. You know, it would be harsh to drop him. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised about that. I think in terms of their approach, I actually think it's their approach that gave us a chance to win the match. I think had we played more traditionally, I don't think we'd have scored as many runs. I think that's what we tried in the Joe Root era. I think that's how we played, and I don't think our batsmen are technically good enough to play defensively for an hour and build a partnership. I just don't believe that. And I think that's been shown time and time again. The only player that is capable of doing that is Joe Root. And he's shown time and time again that he can score runs no matter how he's playing. So in terms of the approach, I actually think that was the only thing that gave us hope. Because, we did score nearly 400 in the first innings. It's a long time since we've been doing that consistently. And I think since we started playing aggressively and intimidating the opposition, yes, you do lose some cheap wickets and sometimes you will get skittled, but a lot of the time you will go and score 400, 450, which is what you need to do in the first innings of a test match to give yourself a chance. And that's what England did. I mean, they scored 250 in the second innings, which, as you said, we were 120 for 4. I think in the Joe Root era, we'd have been all out for 130, 140. So we're adding, I think, through this approach, an extra 200 runs a test match, which isn't always enough, but I think if they would be very unwise to go against that now. Because as I say, I don't think with our selection, I don't think the batsmen are technically gifted enough to play the traditional way. So I take on your point. I get why you've made it. I don't actually know how many wickets of ours came from stupid shots. There was obviously, a couple of stumpings in there. Joe Root got stumped at some point, I think. And there was a couple where they were playing at things they maybe shouldn't have, but that was in that sodden hour, as you called it. I think generally they got out to good balls, and that will happen.
Yeah, I think
you play.
It's just kind of some kind of middle ground, though. I think that I'm not saying shut up shop and defend for your life, but I think there is some sort of balance, or else Australia will take advantage. I know what
Yeah.
you're saying, score the runs while you can. I understand all that, but I don't know what. I mean, it opens up another good point of what Test cricket is to be, because ultimately it's called Test cricket because it's the ultimate test. And effectively, all sorts of batting, whether that be defensive, moderate, or aggressive batting. And I think that you've got to have a mixture of all of those. And I think that I don't know long term whether it will work or not. It certainly has so far against the teams that England have played, but bearing in mind Australia are World Test champions. I mean, the only thing you can say, it is interesting that Australia came into the match saying that they wouldn't change their approach, and then from the first ball, their field was set very, very defensively to avoid the boundaries. So they quite clearly did change their approach, and England could have settled for singles all day. But Australia aren't slouches either, so I think that it's not a case that, although England obviously lost this match, it's not a case that England are necessarily going to have it all their own way. And I think that this next Test match in particular is important, more important than well, they're all important, but very important, because ultimately they can't afford to lose that. And whether that is through a little bit of pragmatism, and that's not getting rid of baseball altogether, whether that's just through changing the approach very slightly to do your best not to lose, which doesn't mean defending all the time, but maybe does mean that you don't hit a reverse sweep on the first ball of day 4. but I think overall it was a great test. There was some great batting from Joe Root. And my only concern is that Smith and Labuschagne didn't turn up at all, and I think those two could be absolutely key for Australia. I think if they can turn up, that they're 100 or 200 partnership every match, and whether England can compete with that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess, batsmen it's very unlikely that Khawaja, Warner, Labuschagne and Smith will all play well in the same match. So it's give or take, isn't it? Yeah, Smith and Labuschagne may get centuries next time, but Khawaja might get a duck. It's fair. I think that the toss is actually very, very key on Wednesday. I think England will want to bat first again. I think they'll want to get out there, impose themselves, and I think that'll just give an extra couple of days to the likes of Broad and Anderson to recover. I think that's actually key. I think if England have to bowl first on Wednesday, then that might change their selection. I genuinely do believe that. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, Lord's very different pitch to Edgbaston. You've got the slope to think about. And as I say, Anderson's got a terrific record there, so I'd be very, very surprised if Anderson was left out. I think England really, it was their catches that lost them the first match, I think. There was a couple of missed stumpings as well for Bairstow. I think if you tidy up those mistakes, England win that first Test match. And lots of people have been very critical of the way England have played, but it was theirs to win.
You're always going to get that. We said before, and people would overreact, didn't we? If England lost, whatever the case, start dropping people, and but I think we've both determined that there's not mass changes needed. Really, just some tweaks.
But you've got to remember they lost the first Ashes Test in 2005. Came back to win that series. It's not all over. I mean, they lost that first Test match convincingly back in 2005. And then, funnily enough, it was the match they won by 2 runs, the one after that. So, a lot can happen. And I think a lot probably will happen. I think the weather's not meant to be quite as good this week as it has been recently. So, perhaps Perhaps England will maybe get a little bit more movement with the ball, with a bit more cloud cover, and put the Australians under some pressure. But I'm just thinking about the first test in 2009. I don't know if you remember that back that far, but Jimmy Anderson and Monty Panesar defending all the way to the end to get us a draw there. But yeah, that was it was very reminiscent actually of the test match we just had. But
bring Monty back.
Bring Monty. Well, you know what? We haven't had a mainline spinner since Graham Swan, in my opinion. Monty Panesar definitely was one of those. He's not anymore, unfortunately, but yes, he was a great player back in the day. But who are you wanting to see an improved performance from in the second test?
To name one name, Ben Duckett.
Okay.
I think not singling him out as such, I think that for him, it will give him a lot of confidence if he gets a 50. I think that if he goes cheaply again in this test match, I don't think he'll be dropped because there's nobody to replace him with, to be quite honest. I think we've got the best that we can get in terms of England openers, but obviously Crawley had a good knock in the first match, and I'd like to see Duckett go well because that opening partnership's so big for England. I think it takes so much pressure off Joe Root and Ollie Pope coming after them. So, yeah, I'm going to go Ben Duckett. Okay.
For me, if he plays, I want to see Jimmy get back on that honours board with a nice 5 for. And I think Anderson will perform. If he plays, I think he'll be back to his best, actually. I think a little bit of cloud cover, that Lord's pitch, I think that slope will really come into to Anderson's strengths. And hopefully we see more of Ben Stokes with the ball, actually. That's another thing. He didn't bowl that much, and when he did bowl, he was bowling at about 73 mile an hour. It was quite worrying, actually, how slow some of England's bowling was.
I'm quite happy for Ben Stokes not to bowl at all. Because I think he's they call him an all-rounder, and he's a terrific cricketer, brilliant. But I think he's a part-time fast bowler at best. Personally, I think that.
I think nowadays he is. I think his fitness has really had an impact. He used to be really, really good with the ball. I think he got some lucky wickets in this Test match. That one where he bowled about 6 foot outside off stump and it was edged onto it was pathetic. But he'll throw himself in there. I hope England just keep with the weird, wacky field setups and don't go into their shell, because I don't think they will. I think they'll come out and I think they'll play just the way they did in Birmingham, to be honest with you. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Definitely.
If I'm honest, yeah. Do you want to give us your predicted 11 for it?
Well, I'm going to go boring. I'm going to go with exactly the same 11 that played Edgbaston.
Okay.
Obviously, without Moeen and Ali, I'm going to go for. No, it's a choice between Mark Wood and Ahmed. Mark Wood.
I think England did lack pace in the first Test match. So I agree with you. I think Wood will come in. I'd like to see Ahmed play. I don't think he will.
I just think it's too much for a risk in this test.
Yeah, I think he might come in later in the series.
Yeah.
But I think Wood will come in. I suppose it depends on the weather forecast as well. And I reckon Australia will make a couple of changes. I think we might see Mitchell Starc come in. I think they missed that left arm action. I think they missed that little bit of variation, Australia. I know they have Nathan Lyon, but their pace bowlers are very, very similar to each other. So I wouldn't be surprised at that. But predictions? What do you think of that, man?
England win. Go on. Let's get it back to one each.
Yeah, I think England will win by 257 runs.
Oh, cool, blimey. England win by 4 wickets.
Okay, they're going to chase it down, are they?
Mm.
Oh, exciting times. Do you have anything else to add, Toby?
Oh. Let's wait and see what happens in the second test, because if Root plays that reverse sweep the first ball again, that's it. Next week,
Yeah.
there'll be a tantrum going on.
Absolutely. But hopefully everybody at home enjoys it. Do expect these podcasts to be a touch shorter than usual. We will be back after the Lord's Test match to talk about that. Of course, we've got Formula One back on next weekend and another sprint race, Toby.
Oh, for God's sake, I forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me.
Can't think of any other sport that's going on at the moment. Well, Wimbledon's starting in a couple of weeks as well. Claire Baldwin's just taken over the reins from Sue Barker.
Oh,
so, that'll be interesting. Obviously, a new generation of tennis players, really. No Roger Federer anymore. Rafa Nadal is taking the rest of the season off, and Novak Djokovic, 36 now, so probably won't last much longer.
I don't know a lot about tennis, but it's going to be a new winner by the looks. Well, for the first time in 20 years, because isn't it just been 4 winners in the last 20 years
for Wimbledon?
Yeah, for the men's.
I think Djokovic will probably still win it, but
okay.
Yeah, I think that the change of the guard is coming now, which is amazing to think. I thought when Federer lost in 2008 to Nadal, I thought that was the changing of the guard. But 15 years later, and I think that's finally starting to happen. So there you go. But we'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about whatever happens at Lord's. And I'm just glad that we're sat in our seats right now, and we don't know what on earth is going to happen. We haven't seen those horrible reverse sweep first shots yet. We haven't seen Moeen Ali be smacked out the park for 36 in an over. And we haven't seen Ben Duckett get his triple century on the opening day.
Or Mel Jones on comms.
Or Mel Jones on comms. I bet you were thrilled that KP was on comms. I know you're a big fan of KP.
Delighted. Him and Owen Morgan. Delighted.
But thanks for the support on the Ashes preview. Do leave a like if you do enjoy. I know a couple of people have sent me messages and saying they were well into the cricket because of our podcast, Toby. So do keep that coming. Hopefully you will enjoy, and we will see you on the flip side. Goodbye.